Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. If you allow us, we would like to start the next session. Before we start our next session.
No, I'm sitting. It's Q&A, right?
ايه تفضل. انت
وسام احنا ما في presentation.
Can I have the clicker?
I have a 2 p.m. 3 p.m.
This is forward.
Ibrahim, Anis from the World Economic Forum.
How are you? See you.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? It's working? Eden, is it working? It's not working, right?
هذا شغال.
Hello. Test. Okay.
Once, two, off.
وسام we'll share mic. Don't worry.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started. If you don't mind just having a seat. So good afternoon. Very excited to moderate this panel today. A lot of the discussions in COP are focused on the long-term ambition and long-term action. But I want to argue that the action and the long-term ambition is actually fairly clear. And what we need to do now is actually move towards that. So our panel take more of a practical lens on how do we move forward on sustainability, how to move forward towards moving not just from ambition to action, but now from action to accountability. And let me start by introducing quickly the panelists. Please, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't mind just having a seat, because we're getting started. Okay, if I'll introduce quickly the panel that we have today. On my left is Ibrahim Zabi, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer at ADNOC. Then we have Dr. Anis Nassar, who is with the World Economic Forum focusing on circularity. Then we have Neil from the Riyadh Bank, one of the leading banks in Saudi Arabia, who is the head of ESG there. Very exciting panel with a broad perspective on sustainability from different stakeholders. So let me start by setting a bit the stage for us. The focus over the last few years has always been on moving from ambition to action and how can we do that. That has already been done. The actions have been defined. The net zero targets have been adopted. In fact, 93% of the global GDP is already under a net zero target. Even in the MENA region, close to 70% of the MENA region is under a net zero target. The question is, how can we activate this? How can we translate this into corporate action? And this is where accountability comes into place. If you look just over the last 12 months or so, the share of the global GDP that has mandated sustainability reporting requirements has reached around 80%. This is very important because this places responsibilities on companies to disclose how they're performing on sustainability, what their targets are, and how they're doing on those targets. And it's very interesting to notice the trend. Just the beginning of this year in January, this was 20%. Today it's close to 80%. It means that the progress on sustainability reporting requirements is accelerating. And you might be tempted to think that those would be countries like the EU or Canada or Australia, and you'll be wrongly mistaken. If you look at the countries on the graph, these are countries like South Africa, Nigeria, Malaysia, India, China. These are developing countries that are trying to ensure that they continue to be part of the global trade system because they recognize that countries, companies, investors care about sustainability not because they're environmentalists who want to save the world, just because they believe that it's an important business imperative and it's important risks and opportunities they need to consider. So with that in mind, let me start the panel discussion, and maybe I start with you, Neil, in terms of understanding what are the drivers that you see behind this growth in regulatory requirements around sustainability reporting.
Thank you, Wissam, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today and alongside my fellow panelists. from a financial institution, I think there's two drivers that are leading to a harmonisation of materiality and reporting. And the first one is simply investor demand. Investors have recognised that sustainability performance equals financial performance, and therefore they are keen to see all private companies standardise reporting so that they can make informed decisions about where they place their capital. That is helping to change disclosure requirements, as we see through the International Sustainability Standards Board, IFRS 1 and 2, that's been live this year. The other side, from the public sphere, of course, and pertinent to where we are now in this location, we had the Kyoto Accords in 97, Paris Agreement in 2015, all of which has set NDCs, which is driving sovereign level engagement. From a financial sector perspective, these two drivers have converged with regulatory requirements. So essentially, regulators have extended that calculus from sustainability performance equals financial performance equals financial stability. And therefore, regulators are now looking to understand how financial sector organisations are managing their portfolios from an opportunities and risk perspective. And key to that is, of course, materiality.
And I think one of the key observations that we have when we looked at the Middle East market, and we did this along with the World Economic Forum, what we found is that the level of disclosures that we have today is not really in line with the rest of the world. We see that the percentage of companies that are reporting on CDP, that are reporting on any of the global reporting standards, actually below the global average. And this places an important, if you want, role to play in terms of raising capacity and raising awareness about the importance of sustainability reporting and how it's moving from historically voluntary-based reporting, where you report what you believe are the most important areas, to compliance-based reporting, where it's important to recognize that these data needs to be investor-grade information that are insured, that are audited, and because it can obviously expose companies to liabilities. So in light of this, I would like to maybe turn to you, Brahim, and discuss, like, what do you think are some of the challenges that MENA companies face as they start their journey on sustainability reporting?
Thank you, Wissam, and it's good to have this friendly discussion with the absence of more audience. But I'm glad I have you and you as the audience. So we get it's quality over quantity. Anyway, briefly, I think I've been listening to you, and I'll be very straightforward on this. You talked about reporting, you talked about voluntary, and I think what we're missing out, and I believe Anis can help us with this. We believe we are missing two things. One, in sustainability practitioners, we do sometimes year-on-year or short-term materiality impact assessment. I am not sure these global reporting organizations do the same. At least if they take into consideration the regional perspective. So if we've been, like we just finished, we're in COP29, we had a historic UA consensus. We've seen that we've proved that global south or emerging markets countries like UAE can deliver, can be over-ambitious, Saudi, a couple of countries in the global south as well. So I am not sure that we're taking two things into consideration. One, when we talk about just transition, for example, what does it mean for international best practices? We have to accept that one size does not fit all. If you dare to say business as usual no longer exists because of sustainability, I agree with you. You have to continue by saying one size does not fit all. What does it mean for a country like UAE? What does it mean a country like Uganda? What does it mean a country for Norway? So this is one. The challenges that we have, we don't have regional standards or regional priorities into consideration. The second thing is whatever on a global sustainability practices that we do, the expectations from us on a global reporting perspective sometimes is as the same as a publicly listed company that's been doing this for the last 20, 30, 40 years. It doesn't work. So, okay, if I say this, I like to have constructive discussion. What's the solution? I think that as a sustainability practitioner from the Arab countries or emerging markets, or from pragmatic point of view, is we need to have a regional division, reintroducing sustainability with a regional perspective. I totally understand we have regulations, for example, in Europe, but we need to have the same. So you need to start raising awareness in the public sector, the policy makers. What does it mean? You talked about net zero commitments, fine. Does any policy maker for any country that's committed to net zero knows that they need to design their net zero buildings from now to be net zero by 2050? Maybe yes, maybe no. So we've done that homework. We created a CSO network in the MENA region. We're 100 companies. We've done that homework with the Arab League, for example. There is lack of awareness. So we need to educate, raise awareness, public sector, private sector, financial institutions. We need to start working from scratch, top, bottom up, bottom down approach. So challenges, two things. One, regional standards. Two, regional priorities. If we could connect these two properly from a regional angle with a true north of the SDGs, for example, in this current sustainability, all the SDGs, not one SDG, the 17 SDGs, we can come up with an acceleration model to accelerate SDG targets.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ibrahim. And I really like the point on the regional collaboration. We've seen that any one country in the GCC or in the MENA region wouldn't have the same weight as if we come together and present a regional voice and say this is our standard that we'll be using. It will be more likely that investors would accept this. It will be more likely that other trade partners will accept it. Similar to what we've seen some Asian countries do, where they come together, for example, on the sustainability taxonomy that Singapore led, but in collaboration with Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and so on. So it's a great initiative. And I know that there's already been discussion with the work that the Ministry of Economy and Planning is doing, and how do we try to make this more of a regional initiative as well. So great to see that point. And maybe I'll jump now to Anis and just ask his perspective on this, in terms of like, what do you see are some of the potential solutions that we can consider as we think about increasing maturity, increasing adoption of sustainability, and specifically disclosures for companies?
Thanks, Wissam, for the question. I like your point on thinking of the differences between the regions. I think it's very important. And we also, I think we're both from the region, the three of us are. We talk about it as the region, but even the region itself has very different countries. Even within countries, there's very different types of organizations. A Saudi Aramco is, of course, not going to have the same type of capabilities than a small or medium enterprise in Saudi Arabia. And so understanding the pathway to maturity of reporting for the different countries, but also for the different organizations within countries, is going to be important so that we don't leave anyone behind. So first, that's a call to action on not to think of MENA as a monolith, but to understand the differences between organizations and countries. The second point I want to make, and you mentioned the leadership that has been happening in the region in terms of, if we think of a AAA framework of setting an ambition, creating the action, and now going to accountability. We have seen leadership on the ambition piece, we have seen leadership on the action piece, but now we also need leaders to want the accountability. And that's potentially the less exciting part of the work, but it's when it becomes actionable. So in terms of solutions, how do we get there? I think there's going to be steps. There's a pathway that leads to very high standards of reporting. And it starts from understanding each sector and their impact on the sustainability of their region. So starting from materiality assessments, for example, trying to understand your own sector, your own value chain, where are your largest impacts, how do those link to your financial performance. And I think you're going to make a point about how sometimes that is easier than expected. And I think this is a great step to go from an overwhelming demand, let's say, which is from the ambition to go from very high standards of sustainability reporting to something that can actually be done. So this is maybe from ambition to pragmatism and to have this pathway into maturity. The second solution angle is on the collaboration, which you also mentioned, both international collaboration but also value chain collaboration. Any reporting of sustainability cannot really be done by a single organization. If we think, for example, of scope 3, we know that for many organizations, the scope 3 go down to 80%, 90%, 95%. So there really needs to be a very strong collaboration between the different value chain players so that we can have accurate measurement and reporting. And that's both from a value chain perspective, but also public-private partnership. As the public sector is going to mandate more of these requirements, there needs to be a partnership to understand which ones are the most necessary. And finally, I'm not sure if it's a solution space, but you mentioned the access to international markets that is going to put an additional pressure in accelerating those sustainability requirements. I think we all have in mind CBAM, for example, but also down the line is CSDDD, so the corporate sustainability due diligence from the European Union, where I think as of 2027, correct me if I'm wrong, organizations that have 1.5 billion of revenue will have to do due diligence assessment of environmental and human risk of their whole value chain. And so this is going to, if they want to have access to the European market, this is of course an extremely ambitious play from the European Union, which will potentially accelerate or give an additional incentive for organizations to look down their own reporting standards. A reaction?
Yes, of course. I said I'm looking forward for this discussion. I agree with you about the gap in the region, and there is a gap. We have GCC, Mashreq countries. We're aware of that, but when it comes to access to international markets, and this can help us with this. Yes, we did the gap analysis for CRDD, with CBAM, hard to abate, the element. We've done that part, but I think if we want to talk about accountability, I think it's a bit early for accountability. We've been saying as sustainability people, like I've been in the industry for a long time, and we always blame the lack of policies. And trust me, now because of a policy in Europe, you're doing it. You know what? Maybe Europe is not the only market. Like I do low carbon oil and gas, and I don't charge my clients for premium. Actually, they don't. Some of them doesn't bother. But if you're serious about this, then okay, Europe should pay me should pay premium for my low carbon then. But this is not the case. I think if we want to talk about our region, I think accountability can come in a later stage. There is a gap between, yes, Aramco and ADNOC and Bank of Riyadh and the small businesses. Hence, the public-private partnership, private-private partnership. We need to do this together to eventually to work for a resolution. So if Bank of Riyadh, of ADNOC or Aramco can say, you know what, I would like to help this organization. And you talk about a big percentage of the economy in our region is either privately owned, family owned, or government owned. So the concept is the same, but to share knowledge between private and private. And this is what I like about WEF. WEF created this Climate MENA champions, and we created the CSO network, and we work together to ensure that ADNOC and Aramco and Bank of Riyadh and HSBC MENA, UAE, they share the knowledge with the private sector. Why is that? Because eventually to have access to capital, not only in Europe, edX is ready, the financial market in Saudi is ready, DFM is ready, the IFC is ready, we're ready. But we need to ensure that the market is ready. And I'm not sure if the market is ready or not. if you would like to have a policy or not now.
I think that's really interesting perspectives and insight. I mean, I have a more bullish perspective. So my perspective is that I absolutely agree with the point that there is a capacity building shortfall when it comes to knowledge in the region, and that needs to be quickly addressed. But the key caveat here is that market forces will not stop. And the region is already exposed to market forces that have an impact on opportunities and risks for every public and private institution in the region, regardless of size. So the call to action here is that capacity building, that knowledge, needs to come online to enable those corporates to better manage their risk exposure and the opportunities. The fact is, market forces are already operating in the region. Just look at the amount of renewable energy, which has grown in capacity by 60% over the last 4 years. The cost of wind-generated inshore power has dropped by 75% in the last 4 years. These are forces that are operating on our region now, on our clients, on our businesses. The issue is not will the market change. The issue is will our businesses, private and public, adapt quickly enough, or we will get left behind.
And I mean, I work at the intersection of sustainability and public sector, as you know, Neil, and that's a big question for public policymakers. Like, what do we do? Do we leave it for the companies in the market to understand these exposures and start adopting these practices? Do we nudge them in the name of protecting competitiveness and resilience and ensuring access to these global markets? And it's not easy to like make that determination. Like, yes, you start with capacity building, but what we have noticed over the last couple of years is that capacity building takes you somewhere, but unless you start using a bit the stick, I think the carrot has its limitations. And sometimes a lot of companies that we have, publicly listed companies in Saudi and some of the other markets, are not seeing these risks that are coming their way, and are not seeing that they're not significant part of the global financial asset pool, just because they're not disclosing, they're not talking about the efforts they're doing in sustainability. And in many cases, by the way, it's not that when they disclose it's gonna show a negative performance. On the contrary, it's gonna probably relieve some of the risks that investors have as perceived risks, but there's no one to tell them that these risks are managed effectively. So I think that you want to say something, Neil?
Thank you. I think that's a really interesting point about disclosure. The issue here is not should you disclose, because the reality is that investors are doing their assessment on every company based on tertiary data. So investors are already doing these calculations. So the interest of companies is to disclose themselves to try to get ahead. If you don't disclose, what happens? An investor will do the calculation for you. It will be done more conservatively, which means it will be to your detriment. And in many cases, they will also add a penalty on because you have not disclosed. So that means that companies therefore get a lower ESG rating than they would do if they disclosed themselves, no matter how bad they might think that disclosure would be. The impact of that is that they are less likely to get access to capital, and the capital they can get access to will cost them more.
I'm glad you put the ESG thing. I think the big issue we have in the region, back to the challenges, is the lack of understanding what really why ESG is there. It's not because of the lack of rating tools. It's a rating tool, but technically it's a risk and compliance of future-proofing the company. That's ESG. You do gap analysis. You look at your governance. You look at social impact. You do your climate risk for years to come. It's not a tool to see how great you are. But back to Neil's point, if I want to take a step back, this is in my humble point, personal opinion about the ESG, because we don't have I did lots of road shows and say your rating. It should not say how great I am. But back to the disclosure, it's an amazing question. If we agree that companies are, most of them we have either government owned or family owned. So you go to your ex-com or to your board and say, I would like to disclose. And some of the cases you don't have access, you don't need access to capital. Why shall I disclose? That's the first question. Why? You want access to capital? You have. Well, even if you want to have access to capital, if you want to have access to capital from international markets, you have to do this. If I want to go from here and I don't need to do that. That's why I think the main challenge for the region yet, we don't see sustainability as an HSE issue, like similar to HSE. You don't in hard to abate, in energy companies, HSE is serious. I think the companies, they should, in our region, they should start looking at sustainability as serious as HSE with this triple bottom line approach. Not only climate, like there is a social impact, there is an economic impact. Why I'm going to do this? Because it's coming my way, So the minute we do this, disclosure will be a byproduct of why am I doing this.
Makes sense. And I think one of the key challenges, as you said, is that companies and sustainability managers are not differentiating between what's existential and what's noise. There is a bit of a sense that everything matters and I need to report on everything, I need to track everything. But the reality is for each industry and for each company, there's probably a small number of topics that are the most relevant, which is, I guess, the key focus of our report that we did with the Leaders for Sustainable MENA, as you mentioned, with the WEF this year. It was focused on, okay, what really matters. And that research showed us that on average, each industry has actually only 5 topics that matter. Not more. It's not 10, it's not 15, it's not 20. It's 5 topics that matter on average that are material topics as per the SASB framework. So maybe I'll take it here into kind of more of this materiality lens and ask you, maybe starting with you, Brahim, like from your perspective, or sorry, starting with Neil, from your perspective, like from a financial sector, what are the key things that really matter for the financial sector, the most material topics?
Thank you, Hassan. That's a great question. I mean, I give my cut from a Rio Bank perspective, but also to call out not just do SASB provide a materiality provider for all sectors, but so does UNEP FI provide an impact tool that considers double materiality that, again, is accessible for all institutions and, again, gives you that breakdown of materiality. So what do we think is most important for us at Rio Bank? I'd say there's probably 4 things that we've called out in the last few months. The first is climate mitigation adaptation. And as part of that, recognising we need to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from our loan and investment portfolios. We need to establish systemic risk management that includes ESG factors to make sure that we're managing our exposures to these types of risks. And that includes incorporating ESG factors into credit decisioning, for example, so right down at the tactical level. But also on the other side of that risk opportunity coin, to make sure that we are focused on expanding our sustainable finance offering and engagement. So we're broadening and deepening that service that we're providing. So that'll be the first area. Second area is looking at financial and public health inclusion. So again, making sure that we are serving underserved areas and looking to capacity build in financial services, water sanitation, health, and those kind of areas. Internally, diversity inclusion, very important to make sure that we've got a representative workforce as employees that are healthy, engaged, and satisfied. And then finally, it's about partnerships and reporting. It's ensuring that we are linked into and partnering with other industry groups, international initiatives such as UN Global Compact, Principles of Responsible Banking, and then we disclose about our membership, about our progress. So we're absolutely transparent about where we are struggling, where we are doing well, and where we're wrestling with serious issues. But to your point, the key aspect here is there is no requirement to report on everything. It is being progressive. It is establishing in a trajectory what is your capacity to report, focus on those things that you think are most important, and then gradually you expand that coverage over time.
Thank you, Neil. And if I hope this answer clarified one thing, it's that all of these aspects that he mentioned are core to the business model that they have as a bank. These are existential questions for the long-term survival of the bank. Sometimes when I speak to sustainability managers, I tell them if one of your top 5 priorities is installing recycling bins in your offices or solar on your roof or electric charging units, then you're probably not focusing on the right things. These are amazing things to do, but I'm pretty sure they're not the top 5 things that should be bothering you. Maybe I'll ask the same question to you, Ibrahim, like from an energy perspective, what would be the most important things that typically keep you busy and hopefully not sleep at night, but still like you think about them at night?
First of all, I would like to welcome my colleagues from the UAE delegation. Thanks for filling us here. I think the definition, the right definition, and I agree with you. I believe sometimes the discussion. I really like what you said, Nels, because I believe sometimes the discussion gets hijacked from us as sustainability practitioners. Why a company? A basic question: why should you have someone like myself and my team in a company? That's a valid question. When I think of that, I think of 5 things. 1, you're a company, cost savings, long-term profitability, license to operate, corporate citizenship, brand reputation. We have always to put this in our mind, and to implement this, we need to approach sustainability again with a triple bottom line approach. So technically what keeps me busy is thinking of the new business model. You know, a couple of years ago, we always said, and I had a discussion with you before the panel, that the old business model as we know it is dead. Yes, okay, I agree. What's the new business model? Obviously, we're in COP29, at least from a climate perspective, we're still discussing the environmental thing. That's why I said, if you remember our discussion, I was so proud that COP28 come up with the EU consensus, because for a change, it took the world 27 years to have an inclusive discussion on energy, on trade, health, spot on health, infrastructure, gender. That's exactly the essence of sustainability. So what keeps me busy, I think, in ADNOC, it's at the heart of everything we do. So it's part of the DNA. The environmental part, we have a decarbonization strategy with $23 billion approved for the decarbonization roadmap in the next 5 years. And we know how we will do it, be it on renewables, be it in CCUS, be it in the electrification. So we've got that part done. The second one, we are making now our gap analysis to ensure that we have an ESG and a sustainable finance model in place for that new business model that we talk about. The third one, we ensure that we as an Emirati company, a national oil company, that we do our part on the national level when it comes to the socio-economic development. Now, translating this into targets and KPIs, I won't say what keep me awake at night. I think what keeps us busy. That's why we are involved in every aspect we do in the company. And I would tell you, my team and I, and we have I'm proud of the team. We have a really good team that ensuring that every step we take within our organization, be it in the different stakeholders, we are there to ensure that the triple bottom line of sustainability is embedded, which means, yes, there should be a return on investment, there should be a financial model for sustainability, which makes us not nice to have, but a must to have. So in general, I think the sustainability practices, we always do our best to ensure that the new business model, we are there. Hence, we are talking now about energy innovation, technological innovation. Technology, AI, is a main thing for us to achieve. It's an enabler to achieve our targets from a sustainability perspective. So we look at it from an efficiency, we look at it from acceleration of achieving our financial. Yes, there is a financial return on investment from sustainability, believe it or not. And we need to talk more about this. The second thing is we have that platform that we accelerate our targets and accelerate the return on investment we do in sustainability. So that's what keeps us busy. from a sustainability practice, I'm a water and environmental engineer. What keeps me awake from our regional perspective is environmental issues like water, like putting. We talk about climate. We're a climate conference, but our region is an arid or semi-arid region. Access to fresh water is important, and we rely on desalination. So that what should keeps awake the whole region at night, not only me. Other things like I think food security, and that's we look at it not as a challenge. We look at it maybe as an opportunity, like climate tech in water, climate tech, energy tech, AI tech, water tech. That's all opportunity for startups and SMEs, creating more jobs in the region. That's what we look at it as an opportunity more than a challenge.
I love that, Brahim. And I mean, most of the conversations that I have with, if you want, the more progressive CSOs that are focusing on the right things, they're almost transforming the businesses that they're operating in. And it's what they call like CSO-led transformations. For example, I was speaking with a CSO in the F&B business, and he told me that one of the key things that they have done when they did materiality assessment is the shift in consumer behavior and preference toward more healthier, organic food, which was something which was a complete blind spot for the business that's kind of a machine that's operating and is not able to see these things. So that's the role of the CSO. It's to be able to see these longer term, 10, 20-year kind of horizon trends and flag them to the leadership team and then lead that transformation. Maybe any final question and then we can wrap it up. Very clearly, Brahim mentioned that, Neil mentioned that, the role of these kind of multi-stakeholder organizations and bringing people together and sharing best practices and creating regional collaboration. How do you see specifically the role of the WEF in this?
Thanks for the question. I think it's a very important one, of course, for myself and for our organization. But I think if we look at the state of the world right now, we're going through a lot of disruption. We come from a time where collaboration was the modus operandi, and now we're going towards a more conflict-based world, maybe from the geopolitical side, maybe from the trade side, and that's unfortunately a new normal that we have to adjust to. And the role of organizations such as the World Economic Forum to try and still embrace collaboration in this disruptive time, I think is critical. And there's other organizations that also allow it. It's not only the World Economic Forum that does that, of course. At the core of what we do, though, is the collaboration between the public sector, the private sector, academia, civil society, and so on. And we do think it's the only way towards solving some of these global challenges that we're facing. The climate challenge is one, on nature, of course, but also the use of new technologies and all these other issues that we do. So that's the context that we evolve in and why we think there needs to be this type of collaboration. In terms of how we translate it into action, particularly on climate, for example, what we aim to do is to seed coalitions. We as the World Economic Forum, we of course cannot change industries, we don't enact policies. It is only through the action of our members that we try to be a platform for changing, for improving the world. So our role is to seed coalitions. One example is the Alliance of CEO Climate Leaders, the largest alliance of CEOs working together towards decreasing our GHG emissions. It counts more than 100 companies right now. To be able to be a member of the CEO Alliance of Climate Leaders, there needs to be a net zero target. There needs to be SBTI compliant target setting as well. And what's very interesting with this alliance is that between 2019 and 2022, they have decreased their aggregate GHG emissions by 10%, which is considerable. It's more than any developed economy. And that also comes at a time where they grew their revenue to 18% on aggregate. So to your point, Ibrahim, there is a business value in sustainability. And I think this is honestly really shining star, let's say. We hear a lot this discourse of maybe we're entering a climate recession, maybe people are going to be more focused on growth in the coming years. Seeing this group of large international corporates being able to deliver on the revenue growth while delivering impressive climate reduction, I think is good hope for the world. In terms of MENA, we of course want to also provide regional support. So there is this work that you have also supported with Bain on the leaders for sustainable MENA. I think it's important to have international, global collaboration, but of course every regional context is different. So through these regional collaboration, we try to enable a space of regional knowledge exchange, regional policy conversations, and so on, so that the global goals can be implemented at the regional level. Finally, we also aim to be an impartial platform for discussion. We don't advocate at the World Economic Forum, it's not what we do, but we provide a space for different stakeholders to exchange their views so that there can be a collaboration. And finally, we provide also thought leadership. So the report that you mentioned is one of them. It's a way a bit to coalesce the different insights that our members are bringing.
With that, I would like to thank the panelists for a very interesting discussion, and thank the audience as well. Thank you so much.
Great to see you. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Thank you, buddy.